everybody. Welcome to Storytime in Seacliff. And today we're celebrating Valentine's Day. And we have a great story. And the name of it is Somebody Loves You, Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch was tall and thin, and he didn't smile. Every morning at 6:30 sharp, he'd leave his brick house and he'd walk 8 blocks to the shoelace factory where he worked. At lunchtime, he'd sit alone in the cafeteria. He'd eat his cheese and mustard sandwich and drink a cup of coffee. Sometimes he would bring a prune for dessert. One Saturday, when Mr. Hatch stepped out from his porch with his dustpan and his broom, he got a surprise. A package was wrapped in brown paper. He had never spoken to the postman before. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Goober," he said. And Mr. Goober smiled. "You're welcome. I always enjoy delivering packages." Mr. Hatch tore the brown paper off. The inside was a white box, and inside that was another box. And inside that there was one heart-shaped, all satiny red with a pink bow on top, and it was filled with candy. Something fluttered to the porch floor. It was a little white card, and he picked it up, and this is what it said: "Somebody loves you." Only then did he remember it was Valentine's Day. Mr. Hatch wondered, who would send this to me? He's all alone, he had no friends, and yet someone had sent him a Valentine. Who could it be? He put the box on the coffee table and he tried to do some dusting, but every time he left the room, he had to keep peeking back to see if the box was still there. He dusted and dusted, and the dust claw seemed to whisper, "Somebody loves you. Somebody loves you." At last, he flung the dust cloth away and he exclaimed, "I have a secret admirer." And then he did something he had never done before. He laughed and he danced and he clapped his hands and he took a piece of candy from the box and he ate it. Mr. Hatch changed his shirt and he found some aftershave lotion in his drawer and he put it on, and he put on a yellow tie with polka dots, and he went out for a walk. Maybe he thought, I'll meet up with the person who left me the candy. Well, no one had seen Mr. Hatch wearing a tie or smelling of aftershave or smiling before, so he did get a lot of attention. Mrs. Weed tripped over her dog, and Mr. Dunwoody fell off his ladder, and little Tina Finn, she spilled all the toys out of her wagon. Mr. Hatch kept on smiling. On Monday, he was back to work, and at lunchtime he sat in the middle of the cafeteria and he spoke to everyone, and he passed out chocolates from his heart too. On the way home, as usual, he stopped at the newsstand. Mr. Smith handed him his usual newspaper. "I think I'll have a pack of mints," said Mr. Hatch. Well, Mr. Smith was shocked. "Was that you speaking, Mr. Hatch?" Indeed, said Mr. Hatch. "I think I'd like some candies. And if you don't mind my saying so, Mr. Smith, you don't look well today." Mr. Smith recovered from his shock and said, "You're right, I don't feel well. I really would like to go to the doctor, but the newsstand has been so busy, I haven't had time to leave." Mr. Hatch smiled. "I'd be happy to watch the stand while you're out." Mr. Smith could hardly believe his ears. "You would? Certainly, just show me what to do." So he ran the newsstand for a few hours while Mr. Smith was out. So then, later in the day, Mr. Hatch made his way to the grocery store. "You know what? I'm a little tired of those turkey wings I've been having for dinner," he said to Mr. Todd. "I think I'd like a nice fresh slice of ham." Mr. Todd weighed the meat and wrapped it. "You look worried," said Mr. Hatch. "I am. My little girl is late. She hasn't come back from school yet, and I really should check, but I can't leave the store." Goodness, no problem. I'll go look for her. So he walked to the school, and sure enough, he found little Melanie by the swings, and he brought her back to the store. Thank you, said the grocer. After supper, Mr. Hatch didn't bother to read the paper. He decided to bake brownies instead. It'd be nice to have brownies and share the lemonade that he was about to make, and he might bring some of those brownies to work. As he was baking, people started to smell the cookies, the brownies, and many of them came over. Some of the parents were there and some of the children. They all gathered around, and Mr. Hatch brought out an old harmonica of his and began playing. Everyone was dancing. The days and the weeks went by, and Mr. Hatch was smiling, he was laughing, he was having friends over, and he seemed to have forgotten about looking for the person who had sent him the Valentine. One afternoon, Mr. Cooper, the postman, came to the door, and he looked very worried and very serious. Come in, you look upset," said Mr. Hatch. "I am upset," the postman said. "I made a mistake some time ago, and I am in deep trouble with my supervisor. Do you by any chance remember the package I delivered to you? I think it was Valentine's Day." "Oh, yes, I do, said Mr. Hatch, and he was beginning to feel a little worried. "Oh, I don't suppose you still have it," he said. "As a matter of fact, I do. I have it in the back. The candy's gone, though. What's the problem?" The postman took a deep breath. "I'm afraid I delivered it to the wrong address. It was supposed to go to another house." Mr. Hatch recalled tearing off the paper. He fetched the heart-shaped box and the pink bow, and he gave them back to the postman. "I hope you don't get in too much trouble." Mr. Hatch recalled tearing off the paper, and he looked around, and he didn't even notice that there was an address on the paper. He handed back the empty box, and just as the postman was walking down the porch steps, Mr. Hatch called him back. Mr. Cooper, here's the little card. Maybe this will help you." And remember, it was the card that said, "Somebody loves you." Well, all alone in his living room, Mr. Hatch sighed. Nobody loved me after all. He read the paper, and he took his shower, and he went to bed early. The next morning at 6:30 sharp, Mr. Hatch left his brick house, and he walked the 8 blocks to the shoelace factory. At lunchtime, he sat in the cafeteria by himself. He ate a cheese and mustard sandwich, and he drank a cup of coffee. After work, he stopped. He didn't speak to the newspaper man, and he stopped and he got his turkey wing from Mr. Todd, and he walked by, and everybody noticed that he wasn't smiling and he wasn't laughing. Everybody whispered, "What's wrong? What's wrong with Mr. Hatch?" Mr. Cooper, the postman, explained what had happened. But we love Mr. Hatch. He's a dear friend." And they all nodded, every one of them. And Mr. Smith told him about the time that he took over the newsstand, and Mr. Todd told him about how he had found his daughter. "Oh, poor Mr. Hatch, what can we do?" And then Mr. Cooper said, "I have an idea." Saturday morning, Mr. Hatch woke up. It was a bright and sunny day, and he put on his old overalls, and he went out on the porch with a dustpan and a broom. And he couldn't believe his eyes. All over the porch were red and white hearts and balloons and pink bows and boxes of candy and yellow streamers, and people were flowing in and out. And there was a shiny, brand new harmonica. The front yard was filled with people, happy, smiling people, and they held up a huge sign, a banner that read, "Everybody loves Mr. Hatch." Mr. Hatch dabbed a tear from his eye with his handkerchief, and this is what he said: "I do believe Somebody loves me after all. And then he smiled, and then he laughed, and then he hurried down to play a tune, a merry tune, with all his friends. Oh, what a wonderful story. I love that story. We read it every Valentine's Day. And today, Valentine's Day, we have two special, wonderful birthdays. We have Louise, our lovely, wonderful cousin Louise, and we have our dear, dear niece and cousin Shannon. So I know that Louise's Robert and Victor and Joseph have prepared a feast for Louise, as is going on in Shannon's house, that Nick and Jimmy and Melissa and the boys and her dad Jim and her mom Jerry have an amazing cake. But I thought that we could sing happy birthday to them both here with our little cake. But remember, we have to check the votes. Voting is always important. And here we go. Here we go. These are our vanilla votes. Scarlett and Rafa and Henry and Rocky and Teddy and Joseph and Christopher, Harris, Maya, Marta, Graham, Audrey and Lila, Hudson, Marlo, Maxine, Lucy, Frida, Patrick, and Hannah. On the chocolate side, we have Martha and Clara and James and Anna. We have Ben and Bee and Bevy and Riley, Tate, Sophia, India, Molly, Alice, Jolene, Eliza, Peggy, and Angelica. Let's count. 21 for chocolate and 20 for vanilla. Oh, it's close, very, very close. But chocolate prevails. So let's see, it's going to be a bit more chocolate. Yes, a beautiful chocolate cake. Let's sing to Louise and to Shannon. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Louise. Happy birthday, dear Shannon. Happy birthday to you both. Ah, so nice, very good. Glad we could all be together. Thank you, cameraman Dan, and a happy Valentine's Day to you too. And thank you, Oberon. And remember, I love you all very, very much.